and that's the Arizona Wildcats. That's where I want to start. You got Tommy Lloyd, who was the National Coach of the Year last year, in his first year, might I mention. I feel like that is the storyline that I want to drive right off the bat, is an amazing story of Tommy Lloyd and that coaching staff. What happens with this team in year two? They obviously lose, 3 players to the NBA, and they're going to have a tough time initially right off the bat, I think, trying to figure out this team, or will they? Because they do have some really fun guys on their squad as well. Arizona's ranked AP 17th. Coaches poll gave them 13. The Torvik ranking gives them that 14. And of course, KenPom, which I think is pretty interesting, has got them at number 10, the number 1 team in the Pac-12, according to KenPom. The rest of them usually got them about the second team in the Pac-12. We'll talk about that team here in a little bit. I'm looking forward to this Arizona Wildcats team. I think they are one of those squads that can really make some noise. I know they're not the favorite in the conference right now to a majority of people. It usually is handed over to the Bruins right now. But I think this is a squad, and you'll see this when our preseason rankings come out, at least on my side, Steve, that I think Arizona can win this conference. I think they can win this conference and do it quite well. I think that this is one of those squads that have a good opportunity at going 22, 23, 24, even maybe higher than that, games winning in this season. What's going on with Arizona?
Well, I want to go back to Tommy Lloyd real quick too. When was the last time you heard any rumblings about problems as far as recruiting or violations since he took over?
That's a very good point.
And again, I love Sean Miller. I do. I think he's a great coach. And I think going back to Xavier is going to be a big thing for him. But almost within the first month of the season last year, there was no more talk about that. Not even like in the shadows, or there weren't even whispers on broadcasts about it anymore. He brought a more up-tempo Gonzaga-like offense, to the table with Arizona. The players that he had, I think, bought into that right away, and I think they enjoyed playing that system. And the other thing with Tommy Lloyd that you have to remember, that he was the driving force behind all of the international scouting that Gonzaga was so successful with, that Mark Few used. And he brought a guy with him from Gonzaga. He has, more than half the roster are international recruits or stars. And I think that makes a huge X factor for this Arizona team, because, okay, they're younger guys. Maybe they're unproven in some people's eyes, but these guys are playing against adults in a lot of the leagues, in their countries. Estonia, Lithuania, Serbia, these young kids at 14, 15, 16, they're playing against adults in some cases, and they're always putting up good showings in international tournaments. So that gives them an advantage against even like a 5-star recruit that's in the McDonald's All-American. I think these international players that come in, I think they're just ready for the grind of a season. So I think what makes Arizona so interesting and why you see that diversity is because it's a roster steeped in international talent, and you really don't know exactly how it's going to come across. But in my book, because of what Tommy Lloyd has done on the international recruiting market, I think that makes Arizona the favorite. I think UCLA is great. I love, Oregon. We're going to talk about it later. But I think because of that talent, the more comfortable they get, they're going to just get better and better as the season goes on.
That's an underrated, I think, viewpoint about Tommy Lloyd, is the fact of his international recruiting and all the work he did at Gonzaga. He was an assistant for Gonzaga for a very long time, under a very well-respected coach. He worked his way up from, grad assistant to top assistant, to associate head coach. I think that's what they call it on the bench. So, he really did see everything. And he had a really cool conversation just this past month on another podcast where he discussed how he wants his assistants to be in the mix more, because he knows how it feels, or how it was to be an assistant at one level, and having that, that rapport with the other players and the other teams and the other coaching staff, I should say. I am really high on this squad. I think Tommy Lloyd is going to be able to overcome the fact that he lost a pretty decent part of his scoring from last season. I mean, obviously, three of his players going to the NBA. I think he can really do it, and it's going to rely on those international, like you said. I really like this. Here's my little teaser. We're going to have this on our prediction show, but here's my teaser. I have Arizona winning the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think the scoring is going to be there. The consistency of some of the scoring might not be there in the early contests, but Adama Bal from France, from the guard spot, he's going to defend as well as he's going to produce offensively, but he can shoot the ball. They've got some big 7-footers on the inside. There's a kid, Henry, I believe it's pronounced Visar, from basketball obsessed Estonia. And you don't think of Estonia as an international basketball. They love basketball players there. They already have another player from Estonia on the roster, but by all accounts, he's the best player ever to come out of Estonia. And what little tape I've been able to pick up to watch, this guy's going to contribute right away. And at 7 foot, now you're talking about like the Porzingises of the world, at the NBA level that can come out, shoot a jumper, hit a three when he needs to, and still bang the boards and dominate at the rim. So Arizona is just so fun. And the player that I also like is Umar Ballo, and that's the player that I mentioned had followed Lloyd from Gonzaga to Arizona. And I was a little bit surprised at that because when that happened, I think we were all surprised at how well Arizona did last year. And that's why Lloyd was coach of the year. But that shows you the kind of relationship that he has with these kids. He's having to talk not only to kids that come into a whole brand new culture where they may not know, be very fluent in the language. He has to convince these parents to say, not only, were we bringing them to another country, but now, we're asking him to basically make his life basketball, and he's not going to be able to travel back to see his family for the next 2, 3, 4 years. So it's just such an interesting dynamic with Arizona. They have enough people that have come in. They have some grad transfers. Cedric Henderson came in from Campbell, and a kid named Courtney Ramey from Texas. They're veterans. They're going to bring a little bit of stability to the backcourt, be able to calm things down because in the Pac-12, sometimes you can get into running contests, kind of calm things down and say, it's okay. Let's play our system. We're going to be okay. And Arizona is going to be a problem later in the year. Will there be some losses, some losses that has us scratching our heads early? I think so. I think that's fair. When you're replacing such a big chunk of your roster after such a magical year last year, I think there's going to be some hiccups. But, once we get into conference play, especially as you're playing a team a second time, I think Arizona is a problem for everybody in the Pac-12.
I think right off the bat, just based off what you just said, talking about Ballo, I think that he's ready for a more important role on this team, and that's going to be huge. And then you mentioned him. I think that transfer from Campbell, Cedric Henderson, I think he's one of those underrated pieces that just fits Arizona and is one of those, with the storyline that I was talking about of how they are missing key NBA pieces. Well, this is a guy who can come in and not only be a good guard piece, but can help on the wing and be some good wing depth. And that's something I think Arizona is going to really need. And I think Henderson fits the bill on that one. We saw him averaging 14 points per game at Campbell. And I think that he can come in and give that team an edge off the bench, because I feel like he'll be one of the strongest, if not the strongest, rotational piece for the Wildcats.
Right. And any national contender has to have those role players as well as the 5-star recruits and the international stars. You have to have those role players that don't mind, I don't want to say doing the dirty work, but basically maybe having to defend the best players on the other side, or being willing to pass up on a shot to maybe get a better shot instill confidence in some of the younger guys, but by just showing them in tough situations. Okay, this is the time when you pull up and you hit an 18-footer or a 20-footer, to kind of change the momentum of a game. You need players like that, and I think Henderson's a perfect example of that. I've heard. I can't say I remember seeing Ramey doing anything amazing at Texas, but you read about him, and it's that kind of guy. He's that meat and potatoes kind of guy that's going to do what's asked of him, even if he's coming off the bench. He's going to do what's asked of him. He's going to give him solid minutes, and he's going to lend stability. So Arizona is just going to be fun.
Like I said, I think they are going to be my pick for the Pac-12 champions. I think it's going to happen. I really do.